Oh boy, I cannot wait to see how the reactions are going to be for this spoiler review. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Movie Emporium's spoiler-filled discussion of Thor: Love and Thunder, the newest film from director Taika Waititi and the newest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay, so this is gonna get pretty bad, to be fairly honest. This is gonna get me probably a lot of hate. I'm fine with that. I have a lot of things to say about this movie. Spoiler sense, so if you have not seen the movie, definitely check it out. It is Marvel Cinematic Universe, so definitely watch it because I know you will. But there will be some things I say in this movie which will probably not agree with a lot of people on their opinions of the film when they see it. So be aware of that. Just to let you know, if you like this movie or you don't like this movie, it's perfectly all right. I understand. All right. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, of course, as we know, a hugely popular, very influential series at this point. Every movie or TV series is going to be hugely anticipated. It's just what it is. And I, with a lot of people, were excited after Endgame to see where this franchise was going to go. And it's safe to say that there is a problem in the studio that is Marvel. There is a problem up in the upper management. I'm not saying it's Kevin Feige's fault. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there is something going on with Marvel there's something wrong. Let's be fairly honest. And it completely shows in Thor: Love and Thunder. Now, before I preface this, I want to say there are moments in this movie, which include like the black and white sequence when they're facing off with Gore. Some of the humor with like the axe and the Mjolnir and stuff like that. They're quite entertaining to watch. I think Christian Bale, for as much as the limited role he gets in this movie, is actually pretty decent, though I think he's underutilized like most Marvel villains are. And I think the look and feel of what Taika Waititi brings to the table when it comes to cinematography and visual flair and his style of filmmaking, which is very unique to himself, is quite good in this movie. It's some of the best I've seen in a long time, to be fairly honest. It has a unique style to it. But uniqueness when it comes to style and uniqueness when it comes to, who Taika Waititi doesn't make it a movie, I guess you could say. Now, I've always said Thor Ragnarok is one of the top 5 MCU movies of all time. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It blends comedy, it blends action, it blends heart. It blends a series of just great motion set pieces that really work. And I think the music's really fun. I think this is like Thor at his had his rawness, and it has Loki who's really good. And so bringing Taika Waititi back after the success of that film, a lot of people don't like that film, but a lot of people will agree that there is a uniqueness to it. So bringing him back is, it makes sense, to be fairly honest. I was really excited by that, like I was with Sam Raimi coming for Doctor Strange. It's at that point after watching this movie, and this is where I'm going to get a lot of flack, where I feel the movie just fails on every level. I think this movie is 3 movies in one in a 2-hour film, which it shouldn't be a problem, but as we've seen with Doctor Strange already, which I've actually grown sour on as I've watched it more and more, there is a disconnect with not only Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but just the story in general. Bringing back Natalie Portman is, it's a good move. It actually helps to kind of conclude her story in a lot of ways, even though there's an end credit sequence to this. And I think this is a movie that wants to be Thor the Dark World, and Thor Ragnarok all mixed in together, but just feels like a greatest hits in a lot of respects. This is just not a good movie, to be fairly honest. This is not a good Marvel movie, but it's just not a good movie at all. It's a movie that is very disjointed. It's a movie that has a lot of structural problems. It's a movie that feels so forced in its comedy that when the Guardians show up in this movie, and they do show up in the very beginning of this movie, there is dialogue being thrown out that feels like, because this is being told from the perspective of Korg, who's telling a bunch of kids the story of the space Viking, and, Natalie Portman's character, Mighty Thor. I get what they're doing. They're making Korg sound like he's telling a TV series in a lot of respects, and that's fine, but when your dialogue switches from interesting to absolutely atrocious on the fly, it really shows that maybe Taika Waititi shouldn't have written the script for this. The Thor Ragnarok was written by someone else, and he kind of took over as director. But there are moments at the beginning of this movie, you start out with Christian Bale's character, which is actually quite interesting, his storyline and how that plays out, even though it's very samey in a lot of respects. He takes over the sword that can kill gods and stuff like that. He kills the god that he praises and stuff like that, and it's really interesting to see. But then you get into Thor, you get into what's his face, Korg and his storytelling of this story. The stuff with the Guardians is some of the worst stuff I've seen in the MCU. The dialogue is terrible. It's not funny. It felt much more realized in the trailer than it does here, and there is no way that they work in this universe. It really doesn't. And what Taika Waititi is trying to do, they feel more in a James Gunn universe, which is where they came from, than they have ever in any other universes. They work, because it's Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, but they're laughing stocks in this movie. They're absolutely it's like disgusting to watch what they've been kind of, they're made fun of, and they're just not really well put together characters. The dimension of the characters is just not there for them. There was such great build up in Endgame with the Guardians and Thor that it should have been a home run. The Guardians should have been like throughout this whole entire movie, but they have to go off and do their own adventure in Volume 3. That is the main thrust of this problem of this movie, is stuff like that, the Guardian stuff, and then, the ideas of just like throwing in a bunch of joke humor that doesn't land at all. And I heard someone say about 80% of the jokes land in this movie, and I think it's even less. I think there's like 10% that actually land, but it's just a lot of disconnect. It really feels like Taika Waititi was pretty much given carte blanche and whatever he wanted to do, as long as he kept to a story, and it just doesn't deliver. This is, I don't know. I'm so frustrated when I talk about this movie, because the idea of this story is we have Gore the God Bitcher, who loses a kid, who finds a sword, who's destroying gods, which is like, it is literally just like run over with a shovel, or not shovel, but a car, and his storytelling effects and stuff like that. It just kind of completely just goes by the wayside. The stuff you saw in the trailer looked much more interesting than what's being presented here. Thor is basically, he's having struggles with who he is and his identity, which never really follows through very much. You have Natalie Portman, who in the comic books, her Jane Foster character, was having problems with cancer. She became the Mighty Thor to help, curb that cancer. And I like that storyline. I like that idea, but it's not really presented very well. It makes you kind of feel sad for her. And then, of course, Kat Dennings pops up as Darcy, and she pops up. And, of course, Eric Selvig pops up, the other character. But because this is a 2-hour movie, they have to rush everything, and all that stuff is rushed. And then she decides she has a couple books, and she finds out about Mjolnir and the powers of what Mjolnir can do. And it's never really fully explained in proper context that this Mjolnir can be summoned by somebody else. And every time, they wield the power of Mjolnir, it helps create like the cancer to kind of subside, but it's actually draining the life force, which is never fully understandable. And then, there's a moment where, where Thor goes back to New Asgard, and, of course, like I said in my review, Tessa Thompson's character is not really used that much. She feels one note, to be fairly honest. But what this movie ends up doing like a lot of TV style, where Thor and Jane Foster have, like, we see like why they broke up and like the stuff behind that. And Jane Foster, or Nicole Kidman, or Natalie Portman, and of course Chris Hemsworth have good chemistry, a lot better than they've had in the other two movies. But it's when she becomes Thor, and or Mighty Thor, when she's at New Asgard, and then of course Gore the God Butcher is attacking New Asgard and stuff like that, it just starts to completely fall apart. The idea of how she garners this power, everything, the idea, just as cool as it sounds, the Stormbreaker being really jealous of Mjolnir, and I don't know, it just, as this movie progresses, the worse and worse the ideas get with Jane Foster's character and her interest with Thor. And, it feels like it's played out. It feels like it's played for laughs. It's goofy. It doesn't make any sense. When the kids are kidnapped Penguin style, if you've ever seen Batman Returns, you know what I'm talking about, by Gore the God Bitcher. They are taken kidnapped. They are basically held captive on this planet of sorts that's like the nothingness, or something like the darkness. And basically, Gore fights in New Asgard, blows it up a little bit. And of course, Thor and Korg and, Jane Foster and Valkyrie and Thor go after him and stuff like that. And, it's stuff like that. It feels like the movie's moving at lightning speed. There's no time to rest. There just feels like there's, set pieces after set pieces after set pieces being used. And then, like I said, at least this like black and white sequence where Gore is really used to full effect, and it really feels cool and kind of, unique for this, MCU, but it doesn't really add much to the story. It's just a way for Thor to lose Stormbreaker, which doesn't make any sense in its own right. It's a way for Jane Foster's revelation to Thor that she has cancer, and she every time she uses Mjolnir because Lady Thor, or in essence, she starts losing her life force, like I was talking about earlier. And then it leads basically Thor, who we have a sequence was was kind of funny where they go to like the Great Halls or whatever, and we see Zeus, who's played by Russell Crowe, who's doing some weird Godfather accent. I don't know what's going on there. He's fine in the movie, but he's doing this like weird accent, and like this feels like the moment, like I said, in this Great Hall or whatever, where we get Taika Waititi just allowing him to create new characters and stuff like that, and just visual flair, and this is where we get like the ass of Thor, he becomes naked or whatever, and it's fine. They eventually attack Zeus, and the lightning bolt that Zeus has is impaled through him and stuff like that, so you think he's dead. And then basically Jane goes back to New Asgard to be put on, because she's dying of cancer, and of course Valkyrie gets stabbed in the back, and it leads basically to Thor going to what is called Eternia, which is, or Eternal or whatever, where he basically allows Gore, if he opens the portal up to make a wish, he's going to destroy all the gods and stuff like that. And then it leads to one of the strangest decision making I've ever seen in a Marvel movie, where the kids are almost killed. They're saved by Thor. They take weapons and they're given the power of Thor. And then they fight off the shadow demons or whatever that Gore has had to his ability. I don't know what the hell they were thinking when it came to this kind of stuff. I guess it's made to allow kids to have a badass moment, but it's like, this is difficult to talk about. It really is. But anyways, Jane decides she's going to use the last of her life force or whatever to take on Gore, and Thor is going to try and rescue Stormbreaker, which is now being used to open this portal. And Jane sacrifices herself, and Gore goes through the portal, and Thor gets the Stormbreaker and stuff like that. And of course, Jane is mortally basically dying, I guess you could say. And on top of everything, somehow Thor is able to kind of forgive Gore, and Gore is basically doing this to get his child back and stuff like that. And he gets his child back, but he kills himself, Kylo Ren style and nonsense. And of course, Natalie Portman's character dies as she does. She goes to Valhalla, and basically the child of Gore becomes the kind of surrogate child, or not surrogate child, but the stepchild to Thor. And she fights with Thor at the end of this movie to fight a bunch of like characters or whatever, a bunch of bad guys at the end of the movie, and that goes to the end credit sequence. And I know I've kind of like shifting back and forth and stuff like that, but the movie once again has a tonal problem. It has a comedic / dramatic problem when it comes to the shifting of tones. It has a storytelling problem where the story is just kind of out of flux with everything it's trying to do. The idea of just, Thor having to go save children, like I said, Batman Returns is a perfect example. The fact that the gods are like hiding and stuff like that is just, that's been done a billion times before. It doesn't make any sense. Look at like Moon Knight with the gods who were just kind of, standing around acting like nothing's wrong. It just... that's this movie in a nutshell. There's stuff in this movie that is doing stuff, and it doesn't fit with other stuff, and it doesn't connect with this point. And once again, there's nothing that is connecting Phase 4 at all in this movie. It's just Thor being a Thor movie with Taika Waititi directing with much more freedom to do what he wants. And once again, there are some funny moments. There are some moments where it's really cool to look at, but it just... when you hear that story and you watch it, and maybe you'll like it, I don't know, but I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't understand the purpose of it. It feels like just for a way to bring Natalie Portman back. It feels like a way to bring Christian Bale back. I was actually really excited when I heard Christian Bale took on the role of this character because he loved the script, and maybe he got bad advice, or maybe Christian Bale was just looking for something for his kids, to do. I don't know. I really don't. And then in the end, it's just a bad movie. This is a bottom tier Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. I actually think this movie's worse than Thor: The Dark World, which will get a lot of raising my eyebrows. I just think it's that bad. And on top of everything, the mid-credit sequence is not as confusing as, of course, Doctor Strange was. This, of course, brings in if it looks like who I think it is of course Roy from Ted Lasso. I think is the one playing Hercules, if I see right, because apparently Zeus can live through a lightning bolt through the chest, and he's talking to someone for about a minute and a half, and it's Hercules, and of course Hercules is in the Marvel comics. I heard a lot of people like losing their insanity, losing their mind about this mid-credit sequence, and maybe I was just too excited for it. Maybe my anticipation was like really high, expecting something truly magnificent. You know, we do get the Watcher in here, which is kind of cool. Maybe I was expecting somebody like, I don't know, Krang or Kang or anything, something like that to be in here. I don't know what I expected, but the, of course, end credit sequence is just Natalie Portman in Valhalla. We see, of course, Idris Elba's Hemdale come back, and there's some stuff with Hemdale and his kid in this movie, which I thought was kind of, was kind of cool for what it's worth. But I've been talking for quite a while, and I was gonna be like super angry in this spoiler discussion, but being super angry just doesn't help the fact that this movie is absolutely god awful. It's a movie that, once again, shows you that there is something wrong in Marvel Cinematic Universe in Phase 4, that nothing seems to be going right. For every, like, Shang-Chi, there's, like, 6 other properties that have not been good. And this is right up there with it. This is the weakest of Marvel's Thor properties. I really do think that. I think as charismatic as Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson and Christian Bale and Taika Waititi as Korg, and like I said, there's also they bring back like Matt Damon and Sam Neill and Luke, I think Luke Hemsworth or something like that. They bring in, of course, Melissa McCarthy. They do that, that whole big where they like acted out. We've seen the whole act out of Thor Ragnarok and stuff like that, which is. It's getting old, to be very honest. One time was funny. Second time is just, I don't really care anymore. But in the end, to finish out the spoiler review, it's a bad movie. It's not very well put together. It's edited poorly. I didn't even get into Michael Giacchino's terrible score for this movie, which feels like Lord of the Rings. It feels like he's ripping off Lord of the Rings, which is really weird. You have, of course, Jamie Alexander come back as Sif, and she's like barely used in this movie, which really bothers me. The fact that she's used less than Natalie Portman, which I know Natalie Portman is a bigger character, but she's used more for laughs, and she just doesn't have a purpose in this movie at all, just outside of making a joke of some sort. The fact that the sequences that were in the trailer feel much more put together than the actual sequences in the movie, but everything about this movie is just, it doesn't work for me. Once again, it may work for you. You might find this like top tier Marvel. I don't know, but once again, this movie just was bad. It didn't work and felt so unnecessary for even a Thor movie. And once again, if you're going to put the Guardians of the Galaxy in this movie, do something interesting with them. Don't do just another battle sequence, because it just doesn't work. So, and on top of that, Chris Pratt's getting a little tiresome as all these characters, but that's just my opinion. So anyways, that is my spoiler discussion of Thor Love and Thunder. Once again, this is a movie I was hoping a lot for, but just didn't deliver at all. So anyways, with that said, that is my take. Thank you so much for watching. Comments below, full tilt board, go for it. Tell me what you think. What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? What do you think of this movie overall? Let me know in the comments. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this video, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.